Almost nothing is as terrible as moving. I used to move people in the summertime. When I was in high school, I used to work for a moving company. Picture it as sort of humid summer heat. Central Virginia, you're sweating. It was near a place called Fredericksburg. The reason that it's so difficult is because of the uneven weight and the awkward angles and the constant fear that if you break something, it's going to come out of your pocket. And it's even worse when you try to help a friend move. The person you have to help move always seems to live on the third floor of a building with no elevator. I hate moving. But somewhere along the way, I came to realize that it might be one of the biggest accelerators of wealth. Most people have heard of house hacking. And what I do is a variation on that. I did do one true house hack deal on my very first deal, but the lesson here is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In this example, house hacking is nearly perfect. You get a low down payment, you live there, you save money, and you get to make money from the tenants and all of that. So it's an excellent strategy. But the part that's less talked about is what happens after you leave. After you leave, you get to rent the property out, and you essentially have a rental that you picked up, but you get a rent to mortgage relationship that essentially is like going through a time capsule. For example, my first house, when I bought it, the rent was $2,100 a month, the market rent, and the mortgage was $2,100 a month. It wouldn't have cash flowed at all if I rented it out that way. But by the time I actually moved out of the property and rented it out, rent had grown to the point where market rent was around $3,000 a month. And my mortgage by that time was $2,000 because I'd gotten PMI removed. The mortgage had come down some, the rent had gone up some. So I got through the years when it wouldn't have cash flowed by living there in the property, which allowed me to pick up some of the repairs and maintenance as sort of just personal living expense rather than a loss. And I didn't have to have the risk of a tenant in the property potentially damaging it during the period where it didn't have margin to cover itself. So this whole second part of what happens after you leave the house hack is actually a tremendous value that the house hack picks up. And that's what I mean by not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. We realized that it was still a good idea to capture these benefits, even though we weren't willing to do the total house hack anymore and get all of the benefits of a house hack situation. So every time we buy a house that we're going to live in, even though we don't end up renting it out, we still get a house. We still get the back half of a house hack, which is that we get a house in a strong, appreciating neighborhood at a lower interest rate that we would have gotten on a rental loan. And it has real long-term upside, both as a rental and from an appreciation perspective. So we now have multiple houses in the $400,000 to $600,000 range that we could have never bought via a BRRRR. If we had bought them via BRRRR, we would have had a situation where these properties would have had mortgages in the thousands of dollars, oftentimes mortgages that were higher than we could have even rented the property for. But instead of doing that, we bought them as primaries. And so by buying them as primaries, we were able to get through some of those periods of time where they didn't cash flow and hold them until the period where they did cash flow. And so for us, that became a strategy. Buy a house, live there for a year or more so we're compliant from a mortgage perspective, fix a few things if you want to, and then when you leave, it becomes a rental. The appreciation on those properties that we bought using that strategy has been way bigger than the cash flow on individual other deals. For example, one house that I bought started off being worth $340,000 is worth $540,000 now. One house that I bought for $265,000 is worth $330,000 now. One house I bought for $330,000 is worth $420,000 now. And they all have better interest rates and they had lower transaction costs than if I had done them as BRRRR deals and bought them as investments. And they cash flow. We have one with a $2,000 mortgage against a $3,000 rent, another with a $1,700 mortgage against a $2,500 rent. I can give example after example, but the reason that these properties are performing so well as time goes on is that they were purchased in the higher quality, not necessarily class A, but like the sort of A minus, B plus type areas, as opposed to the areas where we were doing BRRRR deals, which were more targeted for having more cash flow. Basically, we've been able to utilize this to get properties that actually have a different type of upside that's not only cash flow. And so we have a portfolio that now has a mix of high cash flow opportunity properties and properties that have a good appreciation upside opportunity as well. And it's important to think about. It's not just that we didn't want to buy those properties as rentals, it's that it would have been nearly impossible. I mean, instead of a 3.5% down payment, if you had to put a 20% down payment on some of these properties, we're talking about $100,000 down in some cases. Imagine how long it would take to save that up rather than just being able to buy them with a 3.5% down or 5% loan. There's an additional type of upside as well, which is that which is that down the road we're going to be able to use that appreciation in order to trade those properties out for higher quality assets. It'll be like Monopoly, but instead of 4 houses turning into one red hotel, we're going to be able to turn one house into a 10 to 20 unit apartment building. So, as an example, we're going to be able to take that house that started off being worth 340 and is now worth 540. One day it'll be worth 750. The mortgage will be paid down something like 150. We'll be able to take out a couple hundred grand and put that down as a down payment on a multifamily property. So I'm excited to get to that point in the process. We're not there yet, but that's the ultimate conclusion of the plan. Right now, we're in the stage where we're collecting sweet cash flow and seeing those properties appreciate much faster than the rest of the portfolio. So it's a great strategy if you can stomach moving. If you can stomach moving every couple years. It's worked out for us, and I hope it can work out for you too.